Thanks so much for joining us today. It's a great day for us, and I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to our webinar on keeping customers close, where we'll be exploring customer centricity in a rapidly changing world. My name's Ben Tighe. I'm the partner for our retail and consumer business here at Gate One. David, would you like to introduce yourself?
Morning, everyone. Hope you're all well and thanks for joining. I'm David Ford and I'm a client director at Gate One and lead our customer experience practice.
And I'm delighted to introduce our two very special guests who are joining us today to discuss the findings of our study and report. So Roger and Patrick, would you like to say hi to our attendees?
Yeah, hi. So my name is Roger Scarlett-Smith. I'm heading up the UK and USA business for Stada, which is a mid-sized German-based pharmaceutical company with a very, very wide range of interests, all the way from generic drugs to dermatology to vitamins and minerals, even a smoking cessation business. So we have a huge variety of different customers. I spent a long time before that with GSK as their CMO.
Super, thanks, Roger.
And hello, everyone. I'm Patrick Thistlewaite. I'm the Chief Experience Officer with Havas Health and You. We're the largest global healthcare advertising network and servicing all of the top 10 pharmaceutical companies globally. Prior to this, I've spent time on the consulting side and on the client side. I worked for Wyeth and Pfizer for almost a decade, and in a couple other industries, including travel and the airline industry as well.
Super, thanks. Just thanks so much to both of you for joining us here today. And Patrick, I know it's an early start in New York City as well, so greatly appreciative. Okay, so Riley, do you want to flick up the front cover of the report? Thank you very much. So today we're publishing our 2021 study and report. So why did we do this? We did a survey globally last year on organizational agility, exploring what businesses were doing in order to become more agile. And one of the key findings that came out of that study was that customer centricity was really kind of one of the top 3 priorities for the C-suite across a whole range of industries. And so we felt that it would be a valuable area for us to explore this year, particularly coming on the heels of the pandemic. So what is it? It's a independent research study that's been conducted by Cicero research agency. The report itself is a 50-page PDF. There is a UK, US, and French version, and it's going to be published immediately following this webinar. So all of you who are attending today will receive a copy, and then we'll be making it available for download from gate1consulting.com. So without further ado, David, would you like to talk a little bit more about the study and the methodology that we used?
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Ben. As Ben spoke about last year, we did our corporate leadership campaign was all around organizational agility. And one of the big themes that came out of that was customer centricity. I think we always found that quite interesting because it means various different things to different people. And coming out of the last 18 months or 2 years, we've all had one of the biggest seismic changes that a number of us will see in our lifetimes. We were really keen to delve more into the topic to start to really better determine what that means for consumers and their behaviours, and also what businesses need to think about to respond to that both now and in the future. So to better understand that, we took a global approach in our research. So we took perspectives from 500 business leaders and 2,000 consumers across the UK, Republic of Ireland, France, and the US, and really that was to get a better sense of what customers are wanting and expecting as we move into this new normal from their experiences, but also critically where there may be a disconnect between what businesses think consumers want and what they're investing in versus the reality of what customers are expecting, how they're behaving. We also did this across a number of sectors. So from FMCG through to retail, life sciences, FS, and others to get that broad depth. And to build on that, we did it through a number of industries and a number of details of face-to-face in-depth interviews to really get a richness of insight into those findings. From a geography perspective, We also did this across the companies and the countries that we operate within, just so we could get better understanding of what it means for our clients in those geographies, and to get that perspective of where there might be global differences.
Thanks, David. So Riley's going to be air traffic controlling the Zoom. You'll find at the bottom of the screen a Q&A box. So if you'd like to enter any questions at all during the webinar, we've got some time set aside to make sure that those will be addressed towards the end of the session. So what we're going to do, we're going to step through the key sections in the report, and we've just pulled out some of the key findings and infographics, and then open that for discussion with our two panelists, with Roger and Patrick. So the first section was looking at strategic priorities and how these might have changed during the pandemic. And one of the more interesting findings was the fact that customer metrics, so customer experience, customer service, customer satisfaction, now appear to be considered to be more important than the traditional financial KPIs, such as revenue, margin, and market share. And so, Roger and Patrick, I guess question for you both in terms of how do customer metrics feature in your corporate strategic priorities? And moreover, has any of that changed over the last 18 months as a result of the pandemic?
But I can start. I think it absolutely has changed over the last 18 months in the pharmaceutical industry. We start to see the customer metrics really coming front and center where they largely didn't exist 18 months to 3 years ago. I think pharma is the last sector to be ripe for disruption, and it's happening now. This is sort of forced, the pandemic has forced disruption on the sector and given us an opportunity to reframe how the corporations think about the customer and where they put the customer at the center of their strategies overall.
Yeah, I'll add, I think that it's a process of change, and I wouldn't say that there's been a reduction in emphasis on some of the financial output measures and the market share measures, which are more of an aggregated feel. I wouldn't say that we are strongly focused on things like Net Promoter Score or other customer satisfaction measures, but I think there's a much greater understanding that customer satisfaction amongst all of our different customer bases is the fundamental ingredient of success. So while things are moving in the right direction in terms of becoming more focused at the board level on such issues, I wouldn't say that the transition has been made to prioritize those measures. I think that whether that will ever happen, I don't know, but they're certainly looming larger in the discussions.
I think there's a recognition that they're linked in the sectors that I cover. That's a new recognition that one follows the other, certainly.
Thank you. Thanks both. David. Yeah,
I'd be keen to build on that when you made the point about that it's not as front and center as maybe we would think as consumers. What are the big factors that you think are restricting your ability to actually have those as key metrics? Is that just because it's still the overriding factor on growth and revenue, or it's harder to make that correlation between experience and what that means?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the stuff you take to the bank is the money that comes at the end of it, and there seems to be a lot of kind of still focus on measures that are very specifically financial. So I think it is a struggle to get the order of read right, because clearly the money never comes unless you get the service right and the product mix right and the communications with consumers right. So I mean, those are the leading indicators, but often at the board level the discussion defaults still to the output aspects of what you take to the bank. So I think there is a cultural change, but I would say it's a rather lagging effect, and I think that's why this kind of seminar is quite interesting, because it really explores that gap between what businesses at their strategic level really focus on and what is necessary to succeed.
Thank you. Should we move to the next section, Riley?
And I think just building on that, it probably brings it to life a little bit when you see on the left-hand side some of the interesting things are when people or businesses talking about what they're measuring, customer satisfaction, quality figures quite highly. But I suppose in reality, to your point, it's not necessarily driving the mechanics of the business and where you're headed in terms of decisions. Have you found that, more recently, that more and more you're using these types of metrics to determine the decisions you make in terms of where you invest or where you make changes?
It seems that we have recently in pharma, it's we're bringing in a lot of people from outside the pharmaceutical industry. It's been a very insular industry for years. And people have come up through the Salesforce organization and gone into marketing and then gone into management. But that's changing. And we see a lot of people coming from the travel sector, financial services, and coming in with this mindset of customer first and looking to change it. So we're in a state of evolution and transformation right now. It's not settled, but we are starting to see first companies look to build the infrastructure to measure these things effectively across the enterprise, and then piloting and pushing for these metrics to be measured on a regular basis.
Yeah, and we operate in a number of different categories. I'll just give you a couple of examples. One of our biggest brands is Zoflora. That people in the UK might be familiar with that as a disinfectant product, which has had a huge uplift as a result of strong social media interest. Who knew that this would be a massive topic of conversation, but it has been. So we've had to, our metrics around how that conversation's been going and our contact points and, views of our web content, sharings, etc. like that, really fundamental to understanding the strategy of how we can continue to grow Zoflora and get new product ideas, etc., etc. If you take a product like Flexitol, with a very different kind of thing, that's all about foot care, very important for diabetics. It's a foot cream which is urea based. It's very important, but we're not really getting. It's really important to have the doctors involved in that and that decision making. The consumers won't know that they need this product. They need to be told, and they need to be told by an informed, medically trained intermediary. So for that, then the metrics all around doctor awareness of the benefits of treating a pre-diabetic foot. It's kind of quite a niche area, but lots of people who need this product is really important, and surrounding the doctors with the right information and the ability to recommend or prescribe with confidence. So it's a totally different dynamic. So I think each kind of sector of business needs to work out what are the really critical metrics in order to achieve their strategy. I think a board that looks at only one suite of numbers that kind of determines the overall pattern of customer centricity is probably missing a trick. It needs to be at a lower level.
Yeah. Just to build on that slightly as well, I think there's a really interesting where we've talked here about what people are measuring in terms of the experience, and there's different interactions. How are you finding more and more how you're measuring it's changing it? So a lot of the things that we're seeing is people are moving from very at a point in time measure like NPS through to thinking about the end-to-end journey. Are you starting to look at different data points at different parts of the experience to better ascertain where things are working well and where there need to be changes?
Yeah, I think we're seeing that more consistently, focusing on the customer journey and identifying pain points and problems that we can solve along the way. And with that, there's a significant focus on data, first party and third party, and doing much deeper data analysis on our customers than we've done ever before. So, we're hiring data scientists, our customers are hiring data scientists, and building the infrastructure to gather that data and process it and come up with the insight that's critical to bringing those journeys to life and to solving those problems that we identify.
Mm-hmm. And just final thing on this, because to get perspectives on, because I think what we found from the report is that more and more businesses are investing in sustainability, talent, DE&I as big projects that they're looking at going forward. Have you found what you're investing in is starting to change as well? And I suppose how much of that is driven from your customers versus the wider market and what I suppose at a macro level, big corporations and businesses are investing in?
I mean, for big corporations, and we're a mid-sized one, and we're hoping to become bigger. In fact, we are becoming bigger by the day. You know, definitely the CSI or ESG or whatever you call it, the agenda and sustainability is a massive area of attention, because it's now an important indicator for long-term investors, and it as well as, so there's a self-seeking element to it, as well as what you might call a moral piece. We need to have that whole area buttoned down. So and consumers, I don't think at this stage are really switching behaviour massively as a result of this. I think there's an element of that in the report, that people pay lip service to sustainability, but quite often their behaviour isn't quite in line with that. But I think that's definitely emerging as a real behaviour trend as well, that people are switching preferences according to companies' purpose and credibility on matters like sustainability.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Just this morning when I got up, I had an email from one of our largest clients that was asking us if we'd get on board with a net zero carbon emissions project that they have with 9 other pharma companies all around their electricity suppliers. If they're asking if Havas will join this and join them in taking that forward. So it's definitely becoming, or it has become more significant and a big part of their consideration, along with DE&I. Every request for a proposal that we get asks for DE&I metrics and how we'll contribute to diversity and of their supplier set.
Thank you. Riley, should we go to the next section? So this was one of the more striking findings that we discovered. So we asked the same questions to the businesses we surveyed, and we asked the same question to the 2,000 consumers, which is really kind of what are the top features that customers expect from a business or an organization that they use. So you can see along the top there that the businesses are assuming or thinking that customers want the provision of goods and services online, a seamless experience, and innovative products. So those were the top 3 that our businesses identified. However, in contrast, consumers are kind of really looking to the basics, which is quality of goods and services, best value, and then the experience is then coming third. And when you actually look at the report, there's a whole range of indicators, and you can see the variation in priorities. But Roger, what do you make of these findings?
It's very interesting. I think you can, because there's so much change going on, technology, societal change, ways of working, things like that, that we can get diverted into thinking that that's the thing, and it's still not the thing for consumers. They need, or patients, they need something that really works at good value, and they need the convenience that comes with that. And so everything we do is not about the technology; it's about delivering that end result. And we kind of have to remember that. So this is, the consumers are not very, many of them have been bounced into using new technology because of the absence of any other means. They're not necessarily loving it yet, but they're getting used to it. And fundamentally, they're after the product as opposed to the technology.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen a survey like this that didn't have customers coming back and saying value or price at one of the top metrics that they have for their expectations. But that said, it's both up and down. Value means we can cut price and give them the best deal that they can possibly get, but also provide them more value with the customer-centric platforms and products that we're putting into place. So I think it goes both ways, and I always like to dig a little bit deeper into that and understand what they're really saying, what they're really asking for. Are they asking for a little bit less cost? Probably, they always are. But are there other things that we can give them that will make the bit of a higher cost worth it for them?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And we touched on sustainability briefly in a few moments ago, and I think again the survey findings are telling us that clearly sustainability is very high on the business agenda, and yet consumers are not considering that a major factor in the decisions around purchasing goods and services. So I guess, what are your thoughts in terms of, do we as business leaders and businesses, do we have to take the lead? Or is it our responsibility to educate our consumers and really lead them to where we need to get to overall?
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, and I don't think customer centricity should mean just waiting to be asked to do something by customers. I think it is really understanding that they're fundamentally what their needs are and what they're emerging to be, and what their unmet needs are. Of course, it's marketing 101. So, pushing the consumer along a little way, giving a little edge to the products, challenge them a little bit in terms of complacency. I call it being tactfully audacious in the way of dealing with customers is actually the right thing. They want to feel moved forward by their experience with your brand, and in all sorts of different ways. And if you're simply waiting passively to be told what to do by your consumer, then you're probably missing that.
I think there's a generational aspect to it as well. I know certainly in hiring within our agency, that's a lot more important, maybe of primary importance to recent college graduates and people just joining us out of university. So I think those projects also take a long time to show an impact. So you don't just turn on a sustainability effort today and have an impact. So the two of those things, I think if we invest in it now, we can lead the way, and we're setting ourselves up for success as the younger generation takes over.
Super, thank you. Riley, should we jump to the next section?
So I think on this one, some of it builds on the last section, but there's been, I suppose we had a phase in time where operationalizing and making CX a reality was all about hiring a CXO, organizing around journeys, having the right insight function in place. And I still think some of those things, are relevant to a greater or lesser degree. But when we, from the survey and the findings, some of the key interesting things we found from this piece was about, it fundamentally comes down to the components around how you organize your channels, your data and insight, and how you measure and how you make decisions on the back of it. But I was really keen to kick off a discussion about recruitment came out quite strongly, which we haven't maybe seen as much previously in terms of how people want to make CX a reality, getting the right people in place. What are your thoughts and perspectives on how you're recruiting going forward, and the types of things you're investing in organizationally to be able to deliver that experience for customers?
But maybe I can start on that one, and I'll just hand over to Patrick in a minute. But it's clear that these skills and capabilities need to be built in this area, and one question is insourcing versus outsourcing. And we're here with people representing management consultants, major communication agencies and clients. And somewhere between us, I think we've got an answer, and it will be a bit varied. Whether you insource everything to manage your own kind of services and your own websites, etc. Whether you outsource it to an extent, how do you keep current? It is quite possible to be very much of a laggard if you try to do it all in-house, because you get committed to particular technologies which then need to be moved on. You're not ready to do that. Everybody you hire becomes stale after a certain amount of time. So there are real dangers in trying to build staff internally. On the other hand, if you outsource everything, then you're losing the ability to kind of build that muscle and that critical kind of capability inside. So this is a real issue as to how best to manage the required capabilities, both using both in-source and outsource models.
Yeah, I would say to my clients, when we're talking about insourcing or outsourcing, like, you have to understand what's critical to the business and keep that close. So, we have data capabilities at Havas, for instance, but I always say that, you shouldn't rely on us endlessly to do that work for you. We can do it now, but you have to have a roadmap to taking that internally, because that is it's the core of your business. But beyond just insourcing or outsourcing, recruiting is what keeps me up at night, and finding staff both for us and for our clients to execute this. We have a sort of multi-pronged approach. We have a college graduate program that we put into place to bring people in. We actively look in other industries outside of healthcare and pharmaceuticals to bring talent over. And we also use a distributed network globally so that we can source the best talent wherever it is across the world, which I think is unique for the advertising industry side. So we actively recruit in right now 6 markets, and we'll be adding a 7th very soon, 6 countries around the world. So there has to be focus on setting that strategy, understanding what's important to be insourced and outsourced based on your corporate strategy, and then aggressively going after talent wherever you can find it, because it's not just limited, it can't be limited to one market.
And just to build on that, because I think, whether it's insourcing or outsourcing or recruitment, are you finding that the types of things that you're looking for, behaviors, skills, capabilities, has changed? So is cultural fit maybe more prominent than it was previously? So you'll know that they'll give that right experience to your own customers.
Yeah, cultural fit. Sorry, I'll start. Cultural fit, yes, 100%. But we're just in such a massive explosion of the demand for this right now that it's a key part. But we're really in the scaling stage right now. I just looked yesterday in this area in the Havas network, which is about 6,000 people. We had in the US, so about 1,000, we had about 15 people that I've put in this space 3 years ago. Now we're up to about 250 in that short amount of time. So we're really just rapidly expanding, and culture is critical. It's been tough to maintain through the pandemic. It's a lot easier to deal with culture in person than in cultural fit in person than it is over these. But we're really focused on sourcing and scaling at this point.
Yeah, it's a matter of, I think it's a matter of blending some cultures as well. We were talking about how the focus was still on the output measures, the financial aspects, the sales results, like some of the more traditional measures and things that we hold important, and then accompanying that with these real focus on the input aspects of how to get close to consumers and customers, and what does that look like? How does that intersect with that old world, if you like? And so you need a cultural fit between that cadre of people you bring into the business who understand the kind of input side, and how to accommodate them within a quite a traditional P&L business model approach. That I think is possibly the heart of the challenge for many clients or customers or manufacturers like me. We have to be able to do both things at once, and sometimes it's a bit like oil and water. Mixing is quite difficult. Needs a lot of effort.
Yeah, thank you. Great insights. Riley, should we move to the section 5? So we asked our consumers what they were really most concerned about when engaging with businesses and organizations, and data protection, data privacy came out the clear, the number one priority. And then there was a second one, which was also interesting, which was about ensuring accessibility, particularly for people. There's accessibility from disabilities, but also in terms of income and the sorts of barriers that might get put in place when going down pursuing a very strong digital strategy. So again, very, very interested to hear from you both in terms of what you're doing, particularly around data protection, data privacy, and how you're making that, the commitments that you're making to your clients, how are you ensuring that they're followed through and communicated to your customers?
We're investing enormously in lawyers to start to make sure that we're covered with data privacy and with HIPAA in the US, which protects healthcare data. And actually, you should never underestimate that investment, the scale of it and the value of it, to get that right. It's really easy to do this wrong and to rely on vendors that you're not vetting, or set something up that's not quite secure. There should be a significant investment in data privacy overall to ensure that you have the infrastructure to make this all work. It's something that I underestimated when we really started building out the infrastructure. Now I recognize the scale and value of that.
Yeah, and the consequences of getting it wrong are almost unthinkable. So expensive. It's a bit like plane crashes. You just don't want them, and we have to invest in the right protections. We have to practice, when if things go wrong, how they can be put back. We're on constant drill for this, and it's a really major brand issue if there's a substantial leak or problem that can reputationally destroy a business. Now that we're all so much relying on online, if you suddenly get a black mark for the use of data, or endangering consumers financially or in any other way, the consequences are so unthinkable. You just have to get yourself into position. So yeah, it's a non-debate.
And are you able to demonstrate and communicate that commitment that you've made to privacy? How effective are you in communicating that to your consumers?
Good question. It's always a bit, if you promise to be absolutely safe, you make an error. Could that even be worse on you? I don't know. It's really table stakes. Consumers, I don't believe, would realize how much effort and how much attention goes into this. What they hear about are the failures. What they don't hear about are the everyday successes. And so I'm not surprised this is a high-profile issue for consumers. It's a very high-profile issue internally, but whether there's a lot of merit to be had from offering guarantees or reassurances in this area, I'm not so sure.
The data showed that consumers are interested in this. I think it's an opportunity for us to talk about it, not necessarily making guarantees that can get a little dangerous, but just talking about the amount of investment and effort and focus that we put on this, maybe a little bit more in front, rather than just in the background and the terms and conditions and in the small print. That's an opportunity.
And Roger, thanks both. Roger used the word table stakes. Is it table stakes, or is it a potential source of competitive advantage?
Well, I'm thinking about that. I mean, Patrick makes a good point that maybe, if consumers really want this and want to be reassured, then going some way to explaining upfront what we're doing to protect them could be beneficial. So maybe I'm thinking about this the wrong way around. Interesting.
Thank you. David, anything you want to follow up on?
No, I think the only thing I wanted to build on was probably a bit related to this from the previous section, but one of the interesting things that came out of the report was, I suppose we talk a lot about coming out of, inclusivity and accessibility being a big thing, and how you make sure it's inclusive, because a lot of people have been probably pushed rather than, moved online. When we looked at section 3 and when people see the report come out, one of the biggest factors that would denote a good or bad experience was the knowledge of staff. Yes. And was that human experience and human intervention. And I thought we just get some insights on inclusivity being a big part, but how are you thinking about that digital and physical to ensure that customers have that choice and can interact in a channel and forum that I suppose appropriate for them and how they would like to?
I think there's a couple of aspects to this. One is to make the digital experience really intuitive. And so often, this is the history of it, the digital experiences are designed by digital experts for whom using a computer is second nature. But we're talking about my mum here, right? So, we have to make the digital experience completely intuitive and indeed with something of a human face to it. That's the first point. Then if there is a need to talk to somebody, yes, they need to be empowered to actually answer the question or provide some level of service. And of course they need to be knowledgeable. So, that's that, and I think measuring the customer experience and the customer journey as they interact is really critical for that, to understand, you know, both from a quantitative point of view, how many people bounce off the various sites and things like that without, but also really getting a more qualitative feel for why was it that they weren't engaging, or you know, just, you know, because it's a constant cycle of learning. It should be rapid. It should be that we can adapt these things quickly. But I think we're still, I think generally, you know, because we're all customers, right? We're all consumers, and it always amazes me how difficult sometimes it is to get some simple things done online. You know, and I just think, you know, come on, if they'd spent 10 minutes just going online and trying to buy their own product, would they, you know, would I be having this experience?
I think in the US, we've seen the re-onshoring of call centers a bit in the last couple of years, because we're recognizing that there's significant value in that. And when I've worked with call centers, not only are they ways for customers to really quickly get a solution to their problem if they're knowledgeable, but it's also an amazing source of data. Yeah. The people who are interacting with the customers on a regular basis, on a minute by minute basis, know more about what the problems are than most surveys that we put out, most research that we do. Just go and spend a day in a good call center, and you can come away with you know, a number of action items and opportunities to improve the customer experience.
Super, thank you both. So Riley, do you want to share the next bit? David, do you want to touch on you know, our thoughts as Gate 1?
Yeah, so I think you know, building on the themes of the report, and you know, some of the things we're already starting to see with our clients, we put together our reflections on the key components to think about when you're looking to create and embed you know, a customer-centric organization, have the right components in place to do that. There's 5 areas on there. I'll just very briefly talk through the different areas and what we mean by them. The first one is around developing that adaptive strategy. You know, we mean that by 2 things. One is being aware of the wider business strategy. I think to Roger's point earlier, so that how success is measured is organizational wide and not specific to customer, and there shouldn't be that separation between the overarching organizational strategic objectives and what you want to do for customers. Should be one of the same thing. The other part of that, and the adaptive component, is really about recognizing that consumer behaviors are changing, and depending on the level of insight that you have at a point in time, you're always learning. So, you know, strategic pillars may remain consistent, but actually the way in which you deliver and make changes to the experience will continually evolve and iterate as you learn more about your customers. Next one about, you know, no surprise being obsessed with customer insight. I think, as we touched upon earlier, a number of organisations maybe will still look at a net promoter score and a CSAT, which can be quite static measures at a point in time. And more we're seeing that move to that end-to-end journey perspective of the different key touch points across that, to get to better determine where there's pain points, where there's opportunities, and where do you actually really need to invest. Because, you know, not all parts of the journey are equal. So you need to think about, where am I going to get the biggest experiential gain as well as gain commercially. I'd probably also put be obsessed with customer/employee insight. I think more and more we're finding that, some of Patrick's points earlier, how people are recruiting currently is really critical and important to the success of your organisations, and equally your role, your view on sustainability or on purpose is becoming more and more pertinent, and we have to think about more of that as businesses in doing that. Next one on there is just turning insight into authentic actions, and I think the reality from that is fantastic you have the right insight, but actually do you have the right people in your organisation who can tell you what it means and actually what you need to do differently on the back of it. And I think that's a real crucial point, which is sometimes we work with clients who have so much data, but actually they're not sure where to start and what to do with it. And I think being able to translate that into something that's meaningful and will deliver the outcomes you're looking for is really, really important. Next one on point 4 is about, again, we touched on building that culture. How do you build a culture that is obsessed with delivering great experience for customers and equally obsessed with providing great experience for employees? And we find a lot of the role of storytelling becomes really, really important, because a lot of this is how do we ensure that our colleagues are buying into and aligning with what we're trying to achieve as a business, which naturally translates into the experience you provide. And final one with all these things is how do you execute effectively and how do you execute with the customer in mind? I think there is also instances where you can be quite process-led, or there may be an absence in terms of the translation of the insight into the fundamental change that happens, and that check back to see, has it fundamentally resolved a pain point, delivered the objective that you're looking for. And we badge it's empathy based, but it's really just saying, how do you have the right delivery mechanisms in place to always ensure the customer is being continually tested and retested that it's resolving that pain point. And equally, we're constantly in a world of change. Change is very much our new normal. So having the ability to have capacity and capability to be able to deliver in a empathy-driven way is fundamentally going to ensure that you're not feeling like every 6 to 12 months you're needing to run another transformation program. It's all just about how you do business. But the report goes into that in a bit more detail.
Thank you, David. So that brings us to the end of talking through the key findings. Had a question in from one of the attendees. So this is from Kimberly, who's asking, as a business, we are separating from a pharmaceutical business into a consumer health business. What suggestions or thoughts would you offer to help us quickly pivot from the pharma mindset to the consumer-centric mindset?
That's very interesting. You may be working for GSK, you might be working for J&J, I don't know. Anyway, so I do think that the predominant history of pharmaceutical businesses has been producer push, has been you produce a better mousetrap and you push it at the consumer and you drive it through the doctors, and the job is to kind of find a way to hit the right target with your push. I think the consumer model is much more about pull, and it's about recognizing where the consumer is leading you. Obviously, with the caveat that I mentioned earlier on being a little bit more brave about going slightly ahead of where the consumer is telling you to go. So I do think there is a fundamental cultural shift that's necessary, and probably in the end, that's why these companies are splitting, because they're recognizing that in order to succeed, you have to be brilliant at doing what you do. And if you're brilliant at pushing pills, it doesn't make you brilliant at understanding consumer needs and adapting products in the timescale required. So I think it's about horses for courses. It's about different culture. It's about different metrics, different setups, and and an independent future is probably going to be important for all those companies that are setting up with that more specialist expertise in mind.
Yeah, it's absolutely a massive transformation and change, and so that starts with executive buy-in and push down from the top. This isn't a bottom-up approach in changing a pharmaceutical company to a consumer health company and adding this customer-centric mindset. It has to be top-down, and then the acceptance that this is you've got to build a roadmap and a long-term transformation, people, partners, process, and technology, and all of that has to be considered for moving things forward. That said, I think as I look across the pharmaceutical landscape, every pharma company is going through their own transformation, consumer health aside, and building out new capabilities, bringing in new people and new talent. So some of the groundwork is there now, where it definitely wasn't 5 years ago. 5 years ago, you'd have to set up a completely new thing, a new company, a new infrastructure. Now, I think there's broad recognition that this is important, and there's significant investment in putting those things forward and building the platforms and bringing in the people. Every company is different, though, and acknowledging where you're strong and where you're weak, and then focusing on those things over time is critical to driving that transformation.
Thank you. Great question, Kimberly. Got another one from Sarah, who asks, is there an inherent tension between being brand-led versus consumer-centric, and whether you had any comments on that?
Absolutely. I think I give a presentation. I talk about that for a few slides and what the difference is. And again, in pharma, traditionally very brand-led. I mean, exclusively brand-led, and this is very much turning it on its head. And I guess where we see it a lot is looking at product portfolios that are maybe 5 or 6, let's talk about oncology, maybe have 5 or 6 or 10 or 12 brands, each with their own budgets, their own brand teams, their own marketing, all aiming at the same physician, all aiming at the same doctor. And so that doctor is just being inundated with messaging in a semi-uncoordinated way from all these brands within one company, within the same company. So, you can really clearly there see where if we flipped it and made it customer focused and customer centric, might collapse all those brands at some level in their marketing capabilities into an enterprise level capability that gives that physician what they need when they need it, rather than just pushing out messages from uncoordinated brands across the board. So, and that's a big thing. That's a big shift for a company that's operated in brand silos for many, many years. It takes power away from people that used to have power. It takes budget away from people who used to have budget, and reorganizes that. And so it's a big change, but it's critical from where we're at right now.
Sounds like it's fascinating. Sounds like a big, change in culture and behaviors and mindset.
Absolutely is.
Yeah. And Roger, have you experienced any of that yourself?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, like brands can be led in different ways, and I think the best brands will have a sense of purpose and a kind of progressive attitude to how they can get ahead of and customers, and actually, be leaders in how to reconcile this issue of customer centricity versus brand centricity. So, the danger with a very brand focus is that you stop listening to the customer, you treat them as a hurdle. But if you manage brands right, then you can incorporate the customer-centric mindset and really get ahead of those kind of issues that Patrick's just been talking about. Because it should be for every brand manager is really, in these disparate brands, should be thinking about the impact of that brand, how it arrives at that critical customer. So, to me, it's not just it's like how well are brand managers actually thinking through those issues. Brand centricity is not a bad thing in its own right. It's just how you do it, and you need to think about it in terms of adapting to the changing needs of the customers.
Super fascinating. Thank you, Sarah, for such a great question. Well, it's unfortunately it's time to wrap up. It's been a fantastic discussion. First of all, I'd like to thank all of the attendees who joined today. It's really good of you to give it your time. And then extend a huge thank you to Roger and Patrick for joining us, and Patrick for getting up very early in New York City. So thanks again, and also for the superb interviews that you both gave. And when you download the reports, you'll hear more from Roger and Patrick, and also Sophie Decker, who's the Chief Commercial Officer at EasyJet, who unfortunately wasn't able to join us today. So we'll draw things to a close. We do hope you enjoy reading the report, and we'd love to talk to you about it. In January, we're going to have a little follow-up to give everybody time to digest some of the findings, and then perhaps have a bit more of a panel discussion online, or maybe even in person in the new year. So a huge thank you, and look forward to seeing you all again very soon.